The night wrapped itself around the city, thick and heavy, muffling the usual cacophony of car horns and barking dogs. Martin stepped out of his cab, fumbling with his wallet, his breath a cloud in the crisp air. "Keep the change," he muttered, handing the driver a crumpled bill that was probably too much. The driver grinned, as if Martin had just paid off his mortgage. The cab's taillights disappeared into the night, leaving Martin standing alone on the uneven sidewalk. His modest house loomed ahead, bathed in an eerie glow. Every light inside was blazing. Martin frowned. He was meticulous about turning off lights. His monthly energy bill made sure of that. He fished for his keys, muttering, "Either I've been robbed by someone who really appreciates good lighting, or the cat finally learned how to use the switches." Except he didn't have a cat. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. His sense of humor, thin as it was, had a knack for surfacing at the worst times. As he approached the front door, his footsteps slowed. The curtains twitched slightly. Someone, or something, was inside. His hand hovered over the doorknob. His heart hammered in his chest. For a fleeting moment he considered calling the police, but what would he say? "Hi, yes, I think I've been broken into." "No, I haven't gone inside yet, but I saw my own curtains move." Martin shook his head and twisted the key. The door swung open with a groan that sounded far louder than it had any right to. He stepped inside, and the warm glow of the lights enveloped him. "Finally," a voice said. Martin froze. Standing in the middle of his living room was a woman, except woman didn't quite fit. She was tall, her silhouette both graceful and alien. Her skin shimmered faintly, as though her body couldn't quite decide whether it wanted to reflect light or absorb it. Her eyes were black pools, speckled with tiny shifting pinpricks of light, like a galaxy compressed into twin orbs. Martin said eloquently. "You're late," she said, her voice a curious blend of accusation and relief. Martin blinked. What?" She took a step forward, her movements fluid and deliberate. "Why did you leave me, human?" Her words hit like a thunderclap. Martin opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. Resembling a fish pulled out of water, he settled on nervous laughter. "This some kind of prank? Did Mike put you up to this? Because if he did, tell him he owes me for the therapy bill." The woman tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "You don't remember me," she said, almost to herself. Martin took a cautious step back. "Look, lady, extraterrestrial lady, whatever this is, I think you've got the wrong guy. I don't even leave the city, let alone the planet." She sighed, an exasperated sound that made Martin feel oddly guilty. "Your kind always does this. Run away and pretend it didn't happen. Typical." "Run away? From you?" Martin gestured vaguely. "No offense, but I think I'd remember someone like you, or, any part of this extremely weird situation." Her gaze softened slightly, though the hurt didn't fully leave her features. "You really don't remember, do you?" "Not even a little," Martin admitted, "although I'm starting to remember why I should have invested in better locks." The woman, alien or whatever she was, sighed again and gestured for him to sit. When he hesitated, she pointed to his favorite chair, a battered recliner that looked like it had survived a war. "That's still your favorite, isn't it?" Martin's stomach flipped. It was a lucky guess. Had to be. Still, he sat. She perched on the edge of the couch, her luminous hands clasped in her lap. "I am Calith," she said. "We shared a bond once, a deep one." Martin snorted before he could stop himself. "Bond? Lady, I've never been good at bonding. I can barely keep a houseplant alive." Calith didn't smile. If anything, her expression grew even more somber. "You weren't always like this," she said softly. "Once you were brave. You cared." Martin shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Calith, was it? You seem nice and sparkly, but I'm pretty sure I'd remember if I had some kind of intergalactic love affair." Her gaze sharpened. "It wasn't an affair. It was a partnership. You promised me, Martin. You promised you wouldn't leave." Martin opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. There was something in her voice, something raw and real, that made it hard to dismiss her entirely. "Okay," he said carefully. "Let's say, for the sake of argument, that I did leave you. Why would I do that?" Calith's luminous skin dimmed slightly, like a cloud passing over a star. "That," she said, her voice trembling, "is what I came here to find out." The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Martin wanted to break it with a joke, something to pierce the tension, but for once, nothing came to mind. Instead, he asked the one question he couldn't shake. "Why me?" Calith's gaze didn't waver. "Because, Martin," she said, "you're the one who saved me, and the one who destroyed everything." Martin blinked. "Right. Sure. Makes perfect sense. Except for the part where it doesn't make any sense at all." Calith leaned forward, her starlit eyes boring into his. "Then let me help you remember." Martin swallowed hard, a nervous laugh bubbling up before he could stop it. "Great. As long as it doesn't involve probing. That's just a stereotype, right?" For the first time, Calith smiled, a small, fleeting thing that felt almost human. "You haven't changed as much as I thought." Martin wasn't sure whether that was a compliment or an insult. Either way, it didn't bode well for his quiet, earthbound life. Martin woke up the next morning feeling like he'd fallen asleep inside a kaleidoscope. His dreams had been an unsettling montage of alien worlds, skies painted in hues that didn't exist on Earth, floating cities that hummed as if alive, and an ocean that had stared back at him with unblinking, crystalline eyes. As sunlight streamed through the window, he groaned and sat up, half expecting to see Calith still perched in his living room. The house was silent, though, which was both a relief and vaguely disappointing. "Maybe I imagined the whole thing," he muttered, stumbling into the kitchen and pouring himself a cup of coffee. The caffeine was barely touching his grogginess when he noticed something unusual on the counter, a glowing, jellyfish-like object pulsing faintly. Martin frowned. "Okay, I definitely don't own a sentient nightlight." Before he could decide whether to poke it or run, Calith's voice floated in from behind him. "Don't touch that. It's delicate." Martin spun around so fast he nearly spilled his coffee. There she was, leaning against the doorway, her shimmering skin catching the sunlight in a way that made her look both ethereal and completely out of place in his very human kitchen. "You're still here?" he blurted. Calith arched an eyebrow. "You say that as though you expected me to vanish. I told you, I'm here to help you remember." Martin rubbed his temples. "Yeah, about that. I'm pretty sure I'd remember an ocean with eyes or a floating city." He paused. "Unless I've been watching really weird documentaries in my sleep." Calith crossed the room, her movements unnervingly graceful. "Those aren't dreams, Martin. They're fragments of your past." Martin opened his mouth to argue, but found himself distracted by the jellyfish device. It emitted a soft chime, almost like it was trying to join the conversation. "What is that thing?" he asked, gesturing with his coffee mug. Calith smiled faintly. "It's called a mnemoscope. It's designed to stimulate memory recall by accessing dormant neural pathways." Martin blinked. "Right. And here I thought it was just a really fancy desk lamp." Calith didn't laugh. She picked up the device and carried it to the living room, motioning for Martin to follow. "Sit," she commanded, gesturing to the couch. Martin hesitated. "This isn't going to hurt, is it?" "Not if your brain is functional," Calith said, her tone deadpan. Martin gave her a wary look. "That's not as reassuring as you think." Nevertheless, he sat down, and Calith placed the mnemoscope gently on his head. It adhered with a faint squelch, which was both unnerving and vaguely embarrassing. "Hold still," she said, adjusting the device. Martin gritted his teeth. "This isn't exactly the spa day I had in mind." Calith ignored him, pressing a series of glowing symbols on the device. It began to hum softly, and Martin felt a strange warmth spreading through his skull. At first, nothing happened. Then, like a dam breaking, images flooded his mind. He saw a landscape of rolling hills that seemed to pulse with light, as if the ground itself was alive. He heard a song, no, a voice, calling his name in a language he didn't recognize but somehow understood. And then he saw her, Kalith, standing beside him, her hand outstretched. Martin yanked the nemascope off his head with a gasp. What the hell was that? Kalith watched him intently. You saw something, didn't you? I don't know what I saw, Martin admitted, running a hand through his hair. It was like déjà vu on steroids, but that doesn't mean it's real. Kalith's expression darkened. You think I'm lying? I think, Martin said carefully, that my brain might just be very good at making stuff up. I mean, I once convinced myself that eating an entire cheesecake was a good idea, so clearly my judgment isn't top-notch. Kalith's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. You always did have a strange way of coping with uncertainty. Martin leaned back on the couch, exhaling sharply. Okay, let's say, for argument's sake, that this is real, that we, what did you call it, shared a bond? Kalith nodded. Then why don't I remember any of it? Martin asked. Kalith hesitated, her gaze drifting to the nemascope. Because your memories were altered. Your kind has a unique ability to compartmentalize trauma. When you left Avia, you buried everything connected to it, including me. Martin raised an eyebrow. You're saying I gave myself selective amnesia? In a manner of speaking, Kalith said. But it wasn't entirely your doing. There were external factors. Let me guess, Martin said. Aliens with advanced technology and questionable ethics? Kalith's expression was unreadable. Something like that. Martin groaned. This just keeps getting better. The nemascope emitted a series of plaintive beeps, drawing their attention. Kalith frowned and tapped it lightly. The device sparked, then went silent. Martin said. Is it supposed to do that? Kalith sighed. Your primitive human brain must have overloaded it. Martin gave her a look. Gee, thanks for the vote of confidence. Kalith set the nemascope aside and turned back to him. We'll try again later. For now, you need to rest. Martin laughed humorlessly. Rest? Lady, I just had my brain invaded by a glowing alien jellyfish. Rest is not exactly on the menu right now. Kalith tilted her head, studying him. You're more resilient than you think, Martin. You always were. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Martin wanted to argue, to crack another joke, but something about the way she looked at him, like she was remembering a version of him that didn't exist anymore, left him speechless. For the first time, he wondered if she might be telling the truth. Martin sat in the kitchen the next morning, staring into his coffee cup as if it held the answers to life, the universe, and why an alien woman had camped out in his living room. The events of the previous day played on an endless loop in his mind, floating cities, alien oceans, Kalith. The memories, or hallucinations, depending on how charitable he was feeling, clung to him like cobwebs he couldn't shake off. Across the table, Kalith sipped what Martin assumed was tea. She'd made it herself using ingredients she'd produced from a pouch on her belt, ingredients that included something that looked suspiciously like neon moss. The drink emitted a faint glow, and Martin decided he didn't want to know if it was radioactive. You're staring, Kalith said without looking up. I'm just waiting for the moment you sprout tentacles or start levitating, Martin replied. You know, complete the alien stereotype. Kalith's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. Your humor is as peculiar as ever. I aim to please, Martin said, lifting his coffee in a mock toast. So, what's on the agenda today? More memory-jogging jellyfish, or a guided tour of my very terrestrial life? Kalith set her cup down, her expression turning serious. You need to understand what's at stake, Martin. The fragments you saw yesterday, those were only the beginning. Martin groaned. I'm really hoping the next part doesn't involve more brain zapping. I'm pretty sure I've hit my quota for weird neurological experiences. Kalith stood and gestured for him to follow her. Come. There's something I want to show you. Martin hesitated. Is this going to involve danger? Because I didn't sign up for an intergalactic action movie. You're perfectly safe, Kalith said. Unless, of course, you trip over your own feet. Martin rolled his eyes, but followed her out of the kitchen. She led him to the living room, where she produced a device from her belt that looked like a cross between a smartphone and a crystal. With a flick of her wrist, the device projected a shimmering hologram into the air. The image was breathtaking. A vast city floated above an iridescent ocean, its spires reaching toward a sky awash with auroras. The city seemed alive, its surface pulsating with light in a rhythmic, almost musical pattern. This is Avia, Kalith said softly. Our home. Martin stared, unable to look away. It's beautiful, he admitted, and completely unbelievable. Kalith ignored his skepticism. You lived there, Martin. You were part of something extraordinary. Martin rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, see, that's the part I'm struggling with. I've lived in this house for 5 years. My biggest accomplishment is keeping the plumbing functional. None of this screams extraterrestrial hero. Kalith's gaze was piercing. The Martin I knew was brave, resourceful, and kind. He took risks. He cared deeply about others. Martin snorted. Sounds like a great guy, too bad he's not here. Kalith's expression didn't waver. He is here, buried beneath your doubt and fear. Okay, Dr. Phil, Martin said, throwing up his hands. So what? You think one inspirational speech is going to make me suddenly remember an entire alien life? Kalith sighed. You're remarkably stubborn. That hasn't changed. Call it a survival instinct, Martin shot back. Before Kalith could respond, the hologram flickered and shifted, the serene image of Avia replaced by something darker. The floating city was in ruins, its spires shattered and its light extinguished. The ocean churned violently, and the auroras in the sky were replaced by a suffocating darkness. Martin felt a chill run down his spine. What happened? Kalith's voice was barely above a whisper. Avia fell. Its destruction was catastrophic. Martin frowned. And you think I had something to do with it? I know you did, Kalith said, her tone heavy with sorrow. But you weren't the cause. You were trying to stop it. Martin's head spun. Great. So not only am I an alien, but I'm also an alien with baggage. This just keeps getting better. Kalith's expression softened. You weren't alone, Martin. We worked together. We were connected. Martin swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over him. Connected how? Kalith hesitated, as if searching for the right words. On Avia, bonds aren't just emotional. They're tangible, a fusion of thought and feeling. You and I shared one. Martin rubbed his temples. I'm going to need another coffee for this. Kalith managed a faint smile. Perhaps something stronger. The hologram dissolved, leaving the room in silence. Martin sat back on the couch, his mind racing. He wanted to dismiss everything as a bizarre dream or an elaborate prank, but something about Kalith's unwavering conviction made it impossible to ignore. So, what's the next step? He asked finally. How do I figure out if you're right about me? Kalith reached into her pouch and pulled out a small metallic sphere. We start by seeking the truth. Martin eyed the sphere warily. Please tell me that thing doesn't zap brains. It's a locator, Kalith explained. There are others like you, Martin, people who left Avia and lost their memories. If we can find them, they might help you remember. Martin let out a low whistle. Let me get this straight. You're telling me there's a whole club of amnesiac aliens walking around Earth? Kalith tilted her head, in a manner of speaking. And how do you plan to find them? Martin asked. The sphere in Kalith's hand began to hum softly. With this, Martin watched as the sphere emitted a faint, pulsating light, I don't suppose it comes with GPS coordinates? Caleth smiled, a small, secretive smile. Something like that. Martin sighed. Fine. Let's go find the alien amnesia support group. But if this ends with me getting probed, I'm filing a complaint. Caleth's laughter, soft and unexpected, echoed in the room. For the first time, Martin thought it sounded genuinely human. The metallic sphere hummed like a tuning fork in Caleth's hand, its glow casting strange shadows on the walls of Martin's living room. He leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, watching the thing with the same level of trust he might afford a malfunctioning toaster. So this alien LoJack is going to find others like me? Martin asked, his voice dripping with skepticism. Caleth nodded. Precisely. It resonates with the unique frequency of avian life forms. Those who've hidden on Earth will emit faint signals that the locator can detect. Martin raised an eyebrow. And you couldn't have started with that yesterday? Maybe saved us the whole zap my brain with a jellyfish routine? Caleth's lips twitched. You needed context. Right, Martin muttered. Because nothing says context like invasive alien tech and cryptic backstory. Caleth ignored him and held the sphere aloft. It pulsed once, then twice, before projecting a thin beam of light that pointed straight toward the front door. Martin glanced at the beam, then back at Caleth. So, what? We just follow the glowing space ball like some kind of extraterrestrial treasure map? Caleth tilted her head. You could think of it that way. Great, Martin said, grabbing his jacket. Let me guess. X marks the spot, and Y stands for, you're completely insane. Caleth didn't dignify that with a response. Instead, she stepped out onto the porch, the locator's beam sweeping across the street like a spotlight. Martin followed reluctantly, muttering to himself about how he'd somehow become the sidekick in a sci-fi buddy comedy. The sphere led them down the sidewalk and through the neighborhood. Early risers were out walking their dogs, jogging, or watering their lawns, blissfully unaware that an alien and her very confused companion were hunting for amnesiac extraterrestrials in their midst. Do you have any idea how ridiculous this looks? Martin asked, as they passed a man in a bathrobe retrieving his newspaper. Caleth didn't miss a beat. Humans rarely notice what's in front of them, unless it directly affects their routines. It's one of your more endearing flaws. Martin snorted. Endearing, huh? That's a polite way of saying clueless. The sphere's light brightened as they approached a small coffee shop at the corner of the block. Its neon sign blinked erratically, as if unsure whether it wanted to stay on or give up entirely. Martin stopped in his tracks. Wait, you're telling me there's an alien hiding out at Java Junction? What? Are they working the espresso machine? Caleth's gaze remained fixed on the shop. The signal is coming from inside. Of course it is, Martin said, because nothing says intergalactic fugitive like overpriced lattes and mediocre muffins. Ignoring his sarcasm, Caleth pushed open the door and stepped inside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods filled the air, mingling with the low hum of conversation. Martin followed, scanning the room for anyone who might look remotely alien. Unfortunately, everyone looked depressingly normal. A barista with a man bun was steaming milk behind the counter, and a pair of elderly women were chatting in the corner. A guy in a business suit was furiously typing on his laptop, and a young woman with neon-dyed hair was scrolling through her phone. Caleth moved toward the back of the shop, the locator's beam narrowing to a single table near the window. Martin trailed after her, half expecting to see someone with green skin and antennae sipping a cappuccino. Instead, they found a middle-aged man with a kind face and tired eyes, quietly reading a worn paperback. He glanced up as they approached, his expression polite but wary. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice tinged with a faint accent Martin couldn't place. Caleth didn't answer immediately. She studied him intently, her gaze sharp and searching. Finally, she said, "You don't belong here." The man stiffened, his grip on the book tightening. "I don't know what you mean." Caleth leaned closer, her tone firm but not unkind. "You're from Avia. I can sense it." Martin cleared his throat. Okay, let's maybe tone down the alien interrogation in public. We're trying to avoid the whole get arrested for being weird thing. The man's eyes darted between them, his expression shifting from confusion to something like recognition. You're not human either, are you? Caleth nodded. I am Caleth, and this is Martin. We're here to find others who left Avia. The man's shoulders slumped, and he let out a long sigh. I had hoped this day wouldn't come. Martin blinked. That's not ominous or anything. The man gestured for them to sit, lowering his voice. My name is Jorath. I was a scholar on Avia, before everything fell apart. When the Exodus happened, I chose to hide here. Earth is simpler. Caleth frowned. You mean you ran? Jorath met her gaze evenly. Yes, and I don't regret it. Martin raised a hand. Quick question. Why would anyone leave a shiny floating city to blend in with Earth? No offense, but this planet isn't exactly top-tier vacation material. Jorath smiled faintly. Because on Avia I was a failure. Here I'm just another face in the crowd. Caleth's expression softened. We need your help, Jorath. Martin's memories have been suppressed, and the locator led us to you. There must be a reason. Jorath hesitated, his gaze lingering on Martin. You don't remember anything. Not a thing, Martin said. Unless you count the vague feeling that my life is now a low-budget sci-fi show. Jorath chuckled softly. You haven't changed much. Martin froze. Wait, you know me? Jorath nodded. We crossed paths on Avia, briefly. You were working with the Resistance. The Resistance? Martin repeated. What is this, Star Wars? Caleth shot him a warning look. Focus, Martin. Jorath leaned forward, his tone somber. The Resistance was our last hope. We fought to save Avia from destruction, but we failed. I never thought I'd see another Avian again. Caleth placed a hand on the table, her voice steady. We have a chance to set things right, but we need to remember, all of us. Jorath studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll help you, but you should know, reclaiming your memories won't be easy. The truth is, painful. Martin sighed. Painful, huh? Why am I not surprised? Caleth's gaze was unwavering. We can handle it. Martin muttered under his breath, Speak for yourself. As the three of them sat in the coffee shop, the locator humming quietly between them, Martin couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to get a whole lot more complicated and a whole lot stranger. The air in Jorath's cramped apartment smelled faintly of old books and something vaguely herbal, which Martin decided was either tea or a failed attempt at aromatherapy. The walls were lined with mismatched shelves, all crammed with volumes that looked older than the apartment itself. A small desk sat in one corner, covered in loose papers, strange diagrams, and what looked like a half-assembled gadget that might either be a radio or a toaster with delusions of grandeur. Martin plopped onto the threadbare couch with all the grace of a collapsing marionette. So, what's the plan? Do we all hold hands and chant until my memories come flooding back? Jorath smirked. Not quite. Although if you're volunteering for a ritual, I'm sure we could improvise. Caleth gave Martin a pointed look. Enough jokes. Jorath, you said you could help him. Jorath moved to his desk, picking up a small cube-like device that emitted a faint blue glow. This is a resonance tuner. It's designed to interact with Avian neuropatterns. Think of it as a gentle nudge for your brain. Martin eyed the device warily. You say gentle, but I'm getting strong experimental side effects vibes here. Jorath chuckled. It's perfectly safe, probably. Probably, Martin echoed. That's not exactly comforting. Caleth crossed her arms. Martin, do you want answers or not? Fine, Martin said, throwing up his hands. But if I wake up with an extra limb or start speaking in tongues, I'm suing both of you. Jorath placed the tuner on the coffee table in front of Martin and adjusted a few dials. The device began to hum softly, the sound oddly soothing. Close your eyes, Joreth instructed. Try to focus on the hum. Let it guide you. Martin sighed, but complied, leaning back and closing his eyes. For a moment, all he could hear was the steady rhythm of the tuner and the faint creak of the apartment settling. Then, like a radio slowly tuning in, fragments of sound began to filter through. Voices, laughter, the distant melody of an unfamiliar song. His surroundings shifted. He was no longer on the couch, but standing on a balcony overlooking a city that seemed to glow from within. The air was warm, filled with the scent of something sweet and floral. He looked down at his hands and saw they were covered in a faint iridescent sheen. "Martin?" a voice called from behind him. He turned to see Caleth, not the Caleth sitting in the apartment, but a younger, more vibrant version. Her eyes sparkled, and her smile was radiant. "You're late," she said, her tone teasing. Martin frowned. "Late for what?" She laughed. "For the ceremony, of course. Everyone's waiting." Before he could respond, the vision shifted. The warmth and light of the city were replaced by chaos. The sky was dark, and the once glowing buildings were crumbling. People were running, their faces etched with fear. Martin's chest tightened. "What's happening?" Caleth's voice, now urgent, echoed in his mind. "You promised to help us. You promised to stay." The scene dissolved, and Martin jolted back to reality, gasping for air. Joreth leaned forward, concern etched on his face. "What did you see?" Martin rubbed his temples. "Bits and pieces. A city, a ceremony, and then everything falling apart." Caleth's expression was unreadable. "Do you remember anything specific? Names? Places?" Martin shook his head. "It's all jumbled, like trying to watch a movie with half the scenes missing." Joreth sighed. "The tuner can only do so much. Your memories are deeply suppressed. It'll take time to unravel them." Martin groaned. "Great. So I'm stuck with cryptic flashbacks and zero context. Fantastic." Caleth's gaze softened. "It's a start, Martin. You're remembering." "Barely," Martin muttered. Joreth stood and began rummaging through a nearby cabinet. "While your memories resurface, we should focus on finding others like us. The more minds we connect with, the stronger the resonance." Martin raised an eyebrow. "You make it sound like we're starting a band." Caleth smirked. "In a way we are, but instead of music, we're playing with neural frequencies." "Catchy," Martin said dryly. Joreth returned with a map of the city, marked with strange symbols. The locator identified 2 more potential signals within a 10-mile radius. One is faint, but the other is strong. "Let me guess," Martin said. "The strong signal is at a sketchy location, and the faint one's probably a stray cat." Caleth ignored him. "We'll start with the stronger signal. Time is of the essence." Joreth handed her the map. "Be careful. Not everyone who left Avia will be friendly." Martin's stomach sank. "Friendly? What does that mean? Are we talking cranky neighbors or homicidal maniacs?" Joreth's silence was far from reassuring. As they left the apartment and followed the locator's beam once more, Martin couldn't help but feel like he was walking into a trap. "Just so we're clear," he said, glancing at Caleth, "if this ends with me getting zapped by some rogue alien with a grudge, I'm haunting both of you." Caleth smiled faintly. "Noted." The locator led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, its rusted exterior looking like it had seen better decades. Martin groaned. "Of course it's a creepy warehouse. Why wouldn't it be?" Caleth stepped forward, her posture tense. "Stay close." Martin followed reluctantly, muttering, "Yeah, because that worked out so well last time." Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint hum of machinery. The locator's beam pointed toward a dimly lit corner, where a figure stood silhouetted against the flickering light of an old monitor. As they approached, the figure turned, revealing a woman with sharp features and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. She looked them over, her expression equal parts curiosity and suspicion. Well, she said, her voice cool and measured. I wasn't expecting visitors. Martin forced a smile. Don't mind us. We're just here for the amnesiac alien reunion. The woman's lips curled into a sly grin. Interesting. Let's see if you're worth my time. Martin glanced at Kalith. See? This is why I wanted to stay home. Kalith didn't respond, her attention fixed on the woman. We're looking for others from Avia. Will you help us? The woman tilted her head, considering. That depends. How much do you remember? Martin sighed. Not much, just enough to know I'm completely out of my depth. The woman chuckled, a low, throaty sound. Honesty, I can work with that, but if you want my help, you'll need to prove you're worth it. Prove it how? Martin asked, already dreading the answer. Her grin widened. Let's just say it'll be a test of loyalty. Martin groaned. Why do I feel like this is going to be painful? Kalith's gaze hardened. We'll do whatever it takes. Martin sighed again. Speak for yourself. As the woman's glowing eyes bore into them, Martin realized he was about to learn just how far he was willing to go to uncover the truth, whether he liked it or not. The woman's glowing eyes didn't blink as she waited for an answer. The silence in the warehouse stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the locator still clutched in Kalith's hand. Define test, Martin said, breaking the tension with an uneasy chuckle. Are we talking trivia night or an obstacle course? Because I'm much better at guessing pop culture references than dodging lasers. The woman's grin widened, revealing sharp teeth that shimmered faintly under the flickering light. A test of trust and determination, she said cryptically, her voice carrying a sharp edge. Martin turned to Kalith. Great, another mystery. Just once, I'd like someone to hand us a to-do list instead of a riddle. The woman stepped forward, her movements graceful and predatory. My name is Naran, she said, her gaze flicking between Martin and Kalith. You seek the truth about Avia, but truth is never freely given. It must be earned. Kalith squared her shoulders. We're ready. Martin raised a hand. Whoa, whoa. Let's not speak for everyone, okay? I'm all for earning things, but can we at least get the SparkNotes version of what we're up against? Naran's chuckle was low and unsettling. Your humor will serve you well, human. You'll need it where we're going. Why does that sound like a bad action movie tagline? Martin muttered. Kalith shot him a look. Focus, Martin. Naran gestured toward a door at the back of the warehouse. Beyond that door lies a chamber where your resolve will be tested. You'll face challenges tailored to your weaknesses. Succeed, and I'll help you. Fail, and, well, let's hope you don't. Martin stared at the door. Tailored to my weaknesses? Fantastic. I can't wait to face my crippling fear of tax audits. Kalith ignored him and stepped toward the door. We're ready. Speak for yourself, Martin muttered, following reluctantly. The door creaked open, revealing a long, dimly lit hallway that pulsed with a faint, otherworldly glow. The walls seemed to shift and ripple as though alive. This isn't ominous at all, Martin said, trying to mask his unease with sarcasm. As they walked, the air grew warmer, and the light around them pulsed faster, syncing with the rapid beat of Martin's heart. He glanced at Kalith, who seemed unbothered, her gaze focused and determined. Do you ever get scared? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kalith glanced at him. Fear is a distraction. Focus on the task. Great pep talk, Martin said dryly. Really motivational. The hallway ended abruptly, opening into a circular chamber that seemed impossibly vast. The floor was a smooth, reflective surface that shimmered like liquid silver, and the air buzzed with a strange electric energy. In the center of the room stood 3 pedestals, each holding a glowing object, a small, intricately carved sphere, a jagged crystal, and a metal rod etched with alien symbols. Naran's voice echoed around them, though she was nowhere to be seen. Each object represents a choice. Choose wisely, for it will determine your path. Martin stared at the pedestals. Okay, but what's the catch? Is one of them cursed? Will I accidentally unleash a swarm of space bees? Kalith ignored him and stepped closer to the pedestals, her eyes scanning the objects. They're resonators, she said. Each one emits a different frequency. We have to choose the one that aligns with our purpose. Right, Martin said. And our purpose is? Kalith didn't answer immediately. She closed her eyes, her expression focused. To uncover the truth, to restore what was lost. Vague, but okay, Martin muttered. He reached out toward the sphere, but Kalith grabbed his wrist. Wait, think before you act. The wrong choice could have consequences. Martin sighed. No pressure or anything. Kalith gestured to the crystal. This one resonates with strength and clarity. It's the logical choice. Martin hesitated. What about the rod? Maybe we need something flashy and symbolic. Kalith frowned. The rod is unstable. Its frequency is erratic. It could be dangerous. Martin smirked. Dangerous sounds like my middle name. Kalith glared at him. This isn't a joke, Martin. Fine, he said, rolling his eyes. Let's go with your crystal of clarity. But if we end up in a cosmic laser maze, I'm blaming you. Kalith ignored his sarcasm and carefully picked up the crystal. The moment her fingers closed around it, the chamber shook, and the silver floor rippled like water. Martin stumbled, nearly losing his balance. See? Cosmic laser maze incoming. The room shifted, the walls dissolving into swirling light. When the motion stopped, they were standing in what appeared to be a vast forest. The trees glowed faintly, their leaves shimmering like stars. Okay, Martin said, looking around. This is weirdly beautiful. I was expecting something more horrifying. Kalith's expression remained serious. Stay alert. This is just the beginning. As they moved through the forest, the light grew dimmer and the air became heavy. Strange whispers echoed around them, faint and unintelligible. Martin shivered. Okay, now it's getting creepy. Kalith ignored him, her focus unwavering. The test is designed to challenge us. It will exploit our fears and doubts. Great, Martin muttered. I always wanted to star in my own psychological horror film. The whispers grew louder, forming words that seemed to crawl into Martin's mind. You are nothing, they said. You abandoned your people. You failed them. Martin froze, his chest tightening. The voices felt too real, too personal. Kalith grabbed his arm. Ignore them. They're not real. Easy for you to say, Martin said, his voice shaking. They're not whispering your worst fears. Kalith's gaze softened. They are. I just don't let them control me. Martin took a deep breath, forcing himself to move forward. The whispers faded, replaced by a low hum that seemed to resonate in his chest. Ahead, a beam of light pierced the darkness, illuminating a pedestal with a single object, a small glowing sphere. Naran's voice echoed again. You've proven your resolve. Take the sphere, and your path will become clearer. Martin glanced at Kalith. You're sure this isn't a trap? Kalith nodded. Trust your instincts. Martin stepped forward, his hand hovering over the sphere. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, but he forced himself to ignore them. As his fingers closed around the sphere, the forest dissolved, and they were back in the warehouse. Naran stood before them, her expression unreadable. You passed, she said simply. Martin let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Great. Can we go now, or is there a second round of this nightmare? Naran smirked. For now, you've earned my help, but your journey is far from over. Martin groaned. Of course it is. As they left the warehouse, the glowing sphere tucked safely in Kalith's bag, Martin couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, and that the worst was yet to come. The morning light filtered through the cracked window of Jorath's apartment, casting long beams of warmth onto the cluttered table where the glowing sphere rested. Martin, Bleary-eyed and clutching a mug of something Jorath insisted was tea, stared at it like it might explode at any moment. "Let me get this straight," Martin said, breaking the silence. "This little ball of light is supposed to unlock my hidden memories, reveal why Caliph is mad at me, and possibly stop an intergalactic disaster." He sipped the tea, grimaced, and added, "Because it looks more like a high-tech paperweight." Caliph, seated across from him, gave him an exasperated look. "It's not about what it looks like, Martin. It's a neuroresonator linked to your specific frequency. Once activated, it will synchronize with your mind and unlock the truth." "Uh-huh," Martin said. "And what's the worst-case scenario here? I turn into a sentient blob of goo? Start talking in binary?" Jorath chuckled from his seat in the corner. "You're remarkably good at catastrophizing, human." "Years of practice," Martin muttered. Caliph leaned forward, her expression softer than usual. "Martin, this is the last step. We've come this far. Do you trust me?" Martin hesitated, meeting her gaze. He remembered the quiet moments they'd shared, her unwavering determination, and the glimpses of vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. For all his sarcasm, he trusted her. "Fine," he said, setting the mug down with exaggerated drama. "But if I start glowing or levitating, someone better record it. I want proof for when I inevitably go viral." Jorath picked up the sphere and adjusted a few dials. The glow intensified, filling the room with a soft hum. "When you're ready," he said, placing it in Martin's hands. Martin took a deep breath. "Okay, brain. Don't let me down." He closed his eyes and felt the sphere pulse gently, like a heartbeat. The world around him dissolved, replaced by a vast, shimmering expanse of light. Martin found himself standing on a familiar balcony, overlooking the glowing city from his fragmented memories. But this time, the scene was sharper, more vivid. Caliph stood beside him, though she looked different, more radiant, her features softer. "You remember, don't you?" she asked, her voice filled with quiet hope. Martin frowned, fragments of memory piecing themselves together. He remembered the ceremony, the promise he'd made to help the Ovion people. He remembered the war that had shattered their world and the impossible decision he'd faced: stay and fight a losing battle, or leave to find help, knowing he might never return in time. I left," Martin said, the words heavy in his throat. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but I failed, didn't I? I didn't come back." Caliph's expression was unreadable. "You made a choice, a hard one, and yes, many were lost, but you didn't fail entirely. You're here now." The memory shifted, showing Martin the faces of those he'd left behind. There was sorrow, yes, but also a glimmer of hope. They had believed in him, even when he couldn't believe in himself. When Martin opened his eyes, he was back in the apartment, the sphere dim in his hands. Caliph and Jorath watched him closely. "Well?" Jorath asked. "Do you remember?" Martin nodded slowly, the weight of his memories settling over him. "I remember everything." Caliph's gaze softened. "And?" Martin set the sphere down and leaned back, running a hand through his hair. "I made a mess of things. I thought leaving was the only way to save everyone, but it wasn't enough. I should have stayed." Caliph shook her head. "You made the best choice you could with the information you had. Blaming yourself won't change the past." Martin sighed. "So, what now? Do I get a do-over, or is this the part where I atone for my cosmic screw-up?" Jorath chuckled. "At least your sense of humor survived the memory upload." Caliph smiled faintly. "There's still time to make a difference, Martin. The resonance network is nearly complete. If we activate it, we can reach the others who left Avia. Together, we might be able to rebuild." "And if it doesn't work?" Martin asked. Caliph's expression hardened. "Then at least we'll know we tried." They stood on a rooftop that night, the sphere placed at the center of an intricate array of devices Jorath had assembled. The city lights below sparkled like stars, a stark contrast to the alien tech humming with energy around them. Martin looked at Kaleth. "You sure this won't fry the local power grid?" Jorath grinned. "Relax, human. It's perfectly safe. Probably." "Stop saying probably," Martin muttered. Kaleth handed him a small control panel. "You started this, Martin. You should be the one to activate it." Martin stared at the panel, the weight of his past choices pressing down on him. Then he took a deep breath and pressed the button. The devices flared to life, beams of light shooting into the sky and forming a glowing web of energy. The hum grew louder, resonating deep in Martin's chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, figures began to appear in the light, hazy at first, then solid. Faces Martin didn't recognize but felt he should. "They're responding," Kaleth said, her voice tinged with awe. Martin stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the gathering crowd. These were the remnants of Alvia, scattered across galaxies, yet united once more. One of the figures, a tall man with silver hair and a kind smile, stepped forward. "You've done well," he said, his voice rich with gratitude. "We've been waiting for this moment." Martin swallowed hard. I didn't know if it would work." The man placed a hand on his shoulder. "You gave us hope. That's more than enough." As the night stretched on and the reunion continued, Martin felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. He turned to Kaleth, who was watching the scene with a rare smile. "So," he said, nudging her lightly, "are we good now, or do I still owe you an apology dinner?" Kaleth chuckled softly. "We're good, Martin. For now." Martin grinned. "I'll take it." As the glowing web above them pulsed with life, and the remnants of Alvia began to plan their future, Martin realized that he'd finally found his place, not as a savior, but as someone who dared to hope, even when it seemed impossible. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be.